There are love stories, and then there are love stories that make you question everything you thought you knew about romance. Hollywood has seen countless couples walk down the red carpet, exchange vows, and quietly dissolve into headlines about divorce settlements and custody battles. It has watched relationships that looked perfect from the outside crumble under the pressure of fame, time, and temptation. But every so often, something genuinely rare surfaces, a connection so deep, so honest, and so unshakable that even the most cynical observer has to stop and pay attention. Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell are exactly that. And now, as Goldie looks back on more than 4 decades of love, she has finally said out loud what many people always suspected. He was the only one who could ever reach her the way he does. No ring, no ceremony, no contract, just a choice, made every single morning, to love the same man. To understand why that confession carries such weight, you have to go back to the very beginning. Not 1983, when the world first took notice of them as a couple. You have to go all the way back to a Disney film set, to a old Goldie Hawn crossing paths with a old boy named Kurt Russell during the filming of the musical The One and Only, genuine, original family band. He was young, too young, and she noticed him anyway. Years later, she would tell BBC Radio Desert Island Discs that she thought he was adorable back then, but that the age gap made anything more impossible. Both of them also carried a personal rule at the time. They would never date another actor, and so they went their separate ways, carrying nothing more than a passing impression of each other, stepping into their own lives, their own marriages, their own mistakes, and their own growth. Life moved forward the way it does, sometimes gently, sometimes brutally. Goldie married and had children. She became one of the most beloved actresses in Hollywood, earning an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her role in Cactus Flower, and followed by a second nomination for Private Benjamin in 1981. She built a career that made audiences laugh and think and feel. But her personal life told a more complicated story. Her marriage to Bill Hudson gave her 2 children, Kate and Oliver, before the relationship fell apart. By the early, she was a single mother navigating both fame and heartbreak, trying to figure out what came next. Kurt Russell's path ran parallel in its own way. He had grown into one of Hollywood's most respected leading men, carving out a name for himself through action films and dramatic roles that proved he was far more than just a child actor who had once caught the eye of an old dancer on a Disney set. He too had been married to actress Susan Hubley and had a son, Boston. His marriage also ended. By both he and Goldie were standing at a similar crossroads, twice burned, wiser, more cautious, but still open to the possibility of something real. Then fate, which has a way of insisting on itself, brought them back together. And Kurt Russell walked into an audition for the film Swing Shift, and across the room stood Goldie Hawn. According to Kurt, he had spent the night before drinking with his father and arrived at the audition severely hungover. Not exactly the romantic setup of a great love story, but he looked at Goldie, and the words that came out of his mouth were hardly polished. He blurted out a candid comment about her figure, a remark he admitted to Conan O'Brien that he fully expected to backfire. Instead, Goldie smiled, said thank you, and something shifted between them. The honesty of the moment, unfiltered and unplanned, may have been exactly what made it work. Their first date came soon after, a night that began with swing dancing and ended with a visit to a house Goldie was renovating. One thing led to another in what they jokingly called the imaginary bedroom, until a police officer walked in and discovered them in a rather memorable compromising situation. It was chaotic, funny, and completely unforgettable. That first date alone tells you something important about them. They began with laughter and irreverence, with life catching them off guard. From that night forward, they were inseparable. But falling in love is one thing. What Goldie did next says everything about who she is, and how seriously she took the responsibility of building something lasting. She was a mother first. Kate and Oliver were small children, and any man entering her life would also be entering theirs. She needed to see how Kurt handled that, whether he would step back from the complexity of a blended family or step forward into it. He stepped forward, completely. As Goldie later told People magazine, she watched closely how Kurt behaved around her children when they would visit on set, and what she saw disarmed her completely. She recalled that he was amazing with them, a natural. That observation, more than any romantic gesture, was the moment she knew. It was not his looks or his charm or his name above a marquee. It was the fact that he matched her devotion to children. He saw what she saw. That family was everything. Kate and Oliver would come to regard Kurt as their father in every meaningful sense. The word step never quite fit. He was simply Pa. The couple would later welcome their own son, Wyatt Russell, and completing a blended family that included Boston Russell from Kurt's previous marriage, a family that has remained remarkably close and deeply loving across the decades. Almost from the beginning, the world wanted to know, when are these two getting married? The question followed them everywhere, to premieres, to press junkets, to quiet dinners, disrupted by gossip columns. And for 4 decades, Goldie and Kurt gave honest, consistent answers that the world never quite knew what to do with. Speaking most recently with Entertainment Tonight at New York City Street Y, Goldie explained it plainly. She said she and Kurt both felt that getting married might actually take something from him, something precious that they did not want to surrender. She said they want to choose each other every day, rather than be bound by a legal document. And she was equally clear about the deeper psychology behind that thinking. She described herself as a bird. She said that if someone leaves the cage door open, she may never fly out. But if someone closes that door, she would lose all her feathers trying to escape. For Goldie, freedom and independence have never been in conflict with love. They have been the very foundation of it. Kurt has always shared this view, expressed in his own quieter way. In a candid conversation with the Wall Street Journal, he reflected on the early days of their relationship and the unspoken agreement they reached together almost immediately, to have fun until they no longer wanted to. That pact, made over 40 years ago, has outlasted most legally binding commitments in Hollywood history. He noted that a marriage certificate was never going to create something between them that did not already exist. The love, the loyalty, the family, the daily commitment, none of it required a signature to be real. And Goldie has gone further in explaining what she truly means by freedom. In an appearance on ITV's Loose Women, she described the psychological dimension of their arrangement. That when you are financially independent and emotionally grounded in yourself, remaining unmarried gives you a clarity of choice that legal marriage sometimes blurs. She said that for her, and for Kurt, the fact that they both kept choosing to stay, not because they had to, but because they genuinely wanted to, made the relationship stronger, not weaker. Every morning they woke up and recommitted to each other without any external framework requiring them to do so. That, she said, is the real meaning of commitment. The public reaction to these explanations has always been mixed. Some people find it deeply romantic. Others disagree strongly, arguing that marriage is not about ownership but about sacrament and public declaration. After clips of Goldie's recent Entertainment Tonight interview circulated on social media, comment sections lit up on both sides. Some fans wrote that they always say, "Do what works for you." Others pushed back on the ownership framing. The debate itself is a testament to how personally people take Goldie and Kurt's choices, because their story touches something fundamental in how all of us think about love, commitment, and what it means to truly belong to another person. When Goldie appeared on Conan O'Brien's podcast she said something that she had been saying in different ways for years, but this time it landed differently. She said that the reason Kurt was the one, the only one, had nothing to do with his looks, his talent, or his charisma, though all of those things were real. She said it was because he matched her devotion to children. She used a word that was precise and powerful. The seduction was his personality and his focus on family, not charm, not glamour. His willingness to show up for the people she loved most before he was ever asked to. That word, seduction, is worth sitting with, because Goldie Hawn is a woman who has known Hollywood from the inside for over 50 years. She has understood attraction and chemistry and the intoxicating pull of personality in ways that most people never experience. She has been in rooms full of the most compelling people in the world, and the thing that finally, permanently undid her defenses was watching a man be kind and patient and present with her children. That is what she means when she says he was the only one who could do that to her. He reached a part of her that all the Hollywood glamour and romantic chemistry in the world could not touch, because it was the part of her that was a mother before anything else. And she keeps saying it because it keeps being true. On the Dan Buettner podcast, in January, Goldie opened up with a warmth and frankness that caught people off guard. She spoke about Kurt not just as a partner in life, but as someone she finds genuinely, physically attractive to this day. She described him as the person who makes her laugh, who she finds incredibly handsome after all these years, and who remains her sexual object. Her words, delivered without any embarrassment or performance. She noted that a long-term physical connection is genuinely healthy, and that the vitality of that dimension of their relationship is something she credits as part of what sustains them. It was a confession that most people in long relationships would understand privately, but few would say out loud, least of all on a public platform. Goldie said it, clearly and without apology. What makes this love story different from the carefully curated versions that Hollywood regularly produces is its honesty about difficulty. Goldie and Kurt have never pretended that 4 decades of togetherness happens without friction, without temptation, and without the daily discipline of choosing connection over distance. In her conversation with E! News, Goldie addressed the reality of monogamy in a world as visually stimulating and emotionally charged as Hollywood. She acknowledged openly that it is normal, in any long relationship, to find other people attractive. She said she and Kurt talk about it. They do not perform a pretense of having transcended human nature. Instead, they have built a relationship with what she called elasticity, the capacity to bend without breaking, to acknowledge reality without acting destructively on every impulse. What matters, she said, is not what you feel, but what you do with what you feel. That kind of radical honesty, practiced consistently over decades, is rarer than any grand romantic gesture. She has also spoken with remarkable openness about the specific pillar that holds everything else up, their shared family. On Conan O'Brien's podcast, she described the family as the sticking glue of everything between them. She said she and Kurt do not agree on everything. Their political views differ. Their personalities, in some ways, pull in different directions. But none of that has ever been strong enough to dismantle what they built together. Because when they look across the table at their children and their grandchildren, they see the same thing. And that shared seeing is an anchor that nothing else has been able to move. They have now built a family that spans generations. Between Boston, Oliver, Kate, and Wyatt, and 8 grandchildren at last count, the Hawn-Russell household is loud and warm and full of life. Kurt, speaking to E! News, and described Goldie as a one-of-a-kind human being, and reflected on what it has meant to have experienced her for this much of his life. He called himself the lucky one. He spoke about watching all 4 of their children and all 8 grandchildren growing and building their own lives, and described the feeling with the simple grace that only someone genuinely content could summon. And their children have grown into that legacy. And Kurt reflected in The Hollywood Reporter on having a family of actors, Wyatt, Kate, Oliver, even himself and Goldie sharing the screen at various points. He noted that none of them study each other, that they all do their own things in their own worlds, and that there is something freeing about a family where talent is assumed but never pressured. Kate and Wyatt have both since become celebrated actors in their own right. Kate made Hollywood history of her own, earning an Oscar nomination for Best Actress for her role in Song Sung Blue, and with both Goldie and Kurt present to cheer her on. In early, Kurt began appearing in Taylor Sheridan's Paramount Plus series The Madison, playing a character named Preston Clyburn, a devoted husband and father whose sudden death leaves his family shattered, and his wife, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, grappling with the grief of having not fully appreciated what they had while it was still there. Kurt has spoken candidly about how difficult it was to read those scripts. He told The National that the material hit him really hard because so many of Preston and Stacy's conversations mirrored conversations he and Goldie have had over the years. He described their fictional relationship as the kind you almost never see anymore, a truly loving relationship where there is no hidden shoe waiting to drop. What moved him most was the story's central emotional crisis, a surviving partner realizing, in the wake of loss, how much more there was to love, how much was still unexplored, how much had been taken for granted simply because it was always there. Kurt spoke about this not with detachment but with visible feeling, a man who has held onto something extraordinary for over 4 decades, and who understands, in a way that younger people sometimes cannot, how rare and fragile and precious that really is. There is something quietly devastating and deeply beautiful about watching a man take on a role about losing the great love of his life, and then go home to her every evening. It is the kind of irony that only art can hold without flinching. If there's one moment in their public story that crystallizes everything, the depth, the devotion, the particular way Kurt sees Goldie, it is the day they were both honored with stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Side by side, as they always have been. Kate Hudson was there to speak for her mother. She said something that resonated with everyone in attendance. She had been told she was there to speak about Goldie, but she noted that she has two parents, and they are both here. Their philosophy, she said, has always been family first. And then Kurt stepped to the podium, and he said something that nobody who heard it has forgotten. He thanked his children, Boston, Oliver, Kate, and Wyatt, and called any father lucky to have been gifted with the lifetime they brought him. And then he turned to Goldie, and his voice carried the full weight of everything he felt. He told her that he owed her his wonderful life. He said, simply and completely, "Goldie, I cherish you." He said all the stars in the sky or on the boulevard could not hold a candle to what she was to him. And then he said there was no one else he would rather be next to through all of it. Goldie later told People magazine that she had not expected what he said. She described it as a love fest. She said she had no idea he was going to be so beautiful. And she cried. In front of the cameras, in front of Hollywood, in front of everyone who had spent years asking when they were going to get married. She stood next to the man who had chosen her every day for decades, and she cried. No courthouse, no vows, no certificate, just those words on a boulevard in Hollywood, and a kiss between two people who built everything they have on the simple, radical act of choosing each other